Yes, hi, hello, sports fans. It's time for a brand new episode of Shek Show. And based on the success of the first go round with the two people I'm about to introduce to you, it's time to address all matters black and gold. Specifically, we'll zero in on that team that has three hypercycloids on only the one side of its helmet, talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and their ongoing issues at the QB position in the QB league. As always, we appreciate you following us along on YouTube. Shek Show is how you do that. Subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. We appreciate you doing that. And now let's say hello to them in these fraught times with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I say, it does sound like they're getting closer to a QB signing if he's willing to do so. Let's talk about it with a couple of my fellow ACC also ran supporters. First of all, from UNC. Did they belong in the tournament? I don't know. It's in the rear view mirror now. She's on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And otherwise, from ESPN, it's Brooke Pryor. How are you, sister?
I'm great because the women are still playing in their tournaments and they beat West Virginia on a basketball court and not just in a committee meeting. So I'll take that. I get to double the bragging rights.
All right, very good. And then from the Tribune Review, Trib Live, triblive.com, podcasts on the Pittsburgh Penguins, on the Pittsburgh Steelers, making pages. Man, he is one of the hustlers out there. And I mean that in a good way. I don't mean like he's trying to separate you from your money. I mean, he's hustling out there. So you don't have to do it to get all the insights on black and gold related matters. I called him the first time we said hello that he was sort of our glass half empty, maybe our Pittsburgh based devil to Brooke Pryor's angel. That's sort of the effect I think we're going for as we yins and yang it here. He is, of course, Tim Benz. How are you, Pally?
Fraught times is where I do my best.
You're
You brought up
steeped in
fraught
it.
times. That's a fastball down the middle for me. I'm
Yeah,
all
that's
about
right.
fraught times.
Some people merely adopt it. You were born in it, right?
Yeah, I think what you said before, maybe if the emblem was on both sides of the helmet, then Aaron Rodgers would be here by now. Maybe that's the big holdup. Maybe he wants like the hypercycloid on one side and then like an ad for ayahuasca on the other side, and that'll finally get this deal done.
Well, listen, I guess I shouldn't make assumptions here. Let's set the table first with this. Benz, do you think Aaron Rodgers winds up with the Steelers?
At this point, probably. I mean, the issue with making a determination, a prediction, an assumption is you're not necessarily making that assumption based on what the Steelers might be thinking. You're trying to outthink Rodgers, who, quite frankly, might change his mind on a whim at the 23rd and a half hour. So I don't feel real comfortable about making a prediction with anything involving him. But at this point, I don't know what would change the Steelers' minds. At this point, the only thing that I think could change their mind is if this were to drag out until the draft and they are surprised sitting there at 21 if there's a quarterback that they really want and they get turned on by a QB that we haven't talked enough about that climbs up into the first round that's worthy of being picked at 21. At this point, I think it's the only thing that can change their minds. I don't know what will change Aaron Rodgers' mind. The one thing, if I'm going to play the guessing game with him, I think the one thing that you can speculate about that might change his mind away from Pittsburgh would be if the Giants don't wind up with a quarterback at number 3. And he decides, like, he might be thinking to himself, I want a clean year as the starter. I don't want a threatened year as the starter. I don't want to go to the Giants if they got Shadur sitting right behind me. I don't need that specter over my shoulder. So I'll wait through the draft, see if the Giants don't take a quarterback, then I'll go to New York. I could see that happening, but I'm more of the mind at this point that he's probably going to come to the Steelers. They'll probably announce it a day or two before McAfee's big show in Pittsburgh, and then he'll walk out in a Steelers jersey at PPG Paints Arena and probably not get the reception that he thinks he's going to get. He is such a
Oh,
narcissist.
I think it's a safe place for him though to do that.
Well, with McAfee on the stage, yes, but
Right.
I don't know if he quite has a handle, and I don't know if Pat quite has a handle on how split the mood here is in Pittsburgh about Rodgers coming here. It is not 100%. It's not even 50%. We want Aaron. Like, I ran a web poll. that got over 50% in favor of Mason, with Rodgers, Wilson, and just the word other in the mix. So he's got some winning over of the crowd to do. It's not going to be all cheers and rah-rah and waving terrible towels if Rodgers comes out on that stage after having been announced as the Steelers starter a mere hours in advance.
Boy, man, you open up so many interesting avenues to take here. And one thing we talked about the last time the three of us got together on this was how much does Art Rooney sort of stick his finger in the air to take to see which way the Steelers fans' wind is blowing here. And I know Mike Tomlin doesn't care what the populace thinks, but I do get the sense that R2 does. And I wonder if that is at all a factor in all of this. And I'm not talking about, what they think of the personality, just the entirety of Aaron Rodgers at age 42. Brooke, Pryor, how say you? Is Aaron Rodgers wearing those hypercycloids on the one side of his head come September?
I think that the interesting thing you bring up, first time with Benz, I say probably, but I'm not going to read Aaron Rodgers' mind. No one's been able to do that. Although I think it comes down less between the Steelers and Giants and more between the Steelers and retirement. To me, the longer he goes without signing to a team, the closer he goes to living in a cave forever. That's where I see the tension for him going. But as far as Art Rooney taking the temperature of the fan base, he's shown that he doesn't particularly seem to factor that into his decisions. I also think that even if he were to get on Twitter and see that fans are very much, it almost feels like it's 30-70 wanting him here. 30% of the fans would be okay with it, 70%, or maybe it's just a very vocal 50% don't want him to come to Pittsburgh. The thing is, Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh is going to sell tickets. Because either you want to watch him to see if he can.
I have to interrupt you and say, because I hear some of that kind of stuff, and then they talk about, and they being whoever weighs in on football related matters, let's just cut to the chase here. If Aaron Rodgers is on the team and how supported he is and how excited the fan base is and everything else, the assumption from a lot of the talking heads, the national ones, is what are you talking about, Steelers fans? This guy gives you the best chance to win. Win what exactly is the question. I guess we'll answer that a little bit more. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it is funny the way people kind of put that stuff on what Aaron is going to bring. By the way, Devil's Dameshek says what's going to sell tickets in Pittsburgh is the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's, attributing Aaron Rodgers creating gate is maybe true in Nashville or Charlotte. That's not an issue on the bench.
I think it's something of an issue. Maybe it's not selling tickets, but getting people to show up to games. The attendance has not been stellar recently. Just from my view in the press box I think that there would be a lot more butts in seats if you're watching Aaron Rodgers, either hoping for a good outcome or because you want to watch a train wreck. We all rubberneck for a reason. If there's something bad going on in our proximity, they're going to be eyes on.
I think Steelers fans
it's a draw. When you use the word draw, maybe not ticket sale, but a draw, yes, I think people will be more inclined to see the show, even if the show is likely to have a bad ending. I will agree with Brooke on one point that she said that I think is 100% correct, and use the phrase, Dave, about taking the temperature. If Art Rooney is taking the temperature of the fan base, he needs a new thermometer, or he needs to stick it somewhere else, because he does not have a sense of what the fan base is saying, thinking, or wanting. And for as much as I get raked over the coals for being a critic of Mike Tomlin, maybe not this year. I think people actually appreciate it more this year. But I think Tomlin has done a much better job of, when he has been in public and front-facing, taking the blame and giving the people what they want to hear. And maybe it doesn't come off as sincere as they want, but he has said the right things better than his owner has. I don't know if you saw the clip of Art Rooney II sitting down with my colleague over at Channel 4, Ashley Liotis, and she asked him about the recent stretch of non-playoff winning seasons. And he responded somewhat curtly and said, well, we've done some winning around here. Not for the last 8 years of consequence, you haven't. The last thing, the very last thing in the world that anybody in Pittsburgh wanted to hear in response to that question was to hearken back to 2016 or 2015. That's not how anybody wanted to hear that this run was going to be defended. People just wanted to hear we'll do better. And Tomlin has said that publicly much better than Rooney has.
Well, we'll get to the Tomlin of it in just a second here, but I guess this kind of glancingly at least involves Tomlin. Brooke, Ben said, well, no one knows what, and you said, no one knows what Aaron's thinking. And my ongoing assumption with anything involving the Steelers is when people talk about my sources say this is what's happening with the Steelers and that player, it's always the player's side. It's the agent, it's friends of, and otherwise it's never the Steelers, because the only two Steelers who really know what's going on are Tomlin and Khan, who, first of all, do you agree with that? You're in the room there, you and Benz, all the time. Do you agree with that framing? And in this case, it does seem like who those sources are is even murkier than usual. How say you?
Yeah, I think that is most of the time the case because, the Steelers are not an organization that leaks often. And if they leak in very predictable patterns. In this case, though, Aaron Rodgers' circle is so small. He pay attention to things that McAfee is saying. Other than that, he has had times in the past where he's, leaked stuff and told things to people whether it's local beat writers, national beat writers. But right now, he's not talking. His agent isn't talking. At least that's my understanding. Everything that we're hearing about him is coming from the team's perspectives, from Steelers sources, from Giants sources, from Viking sources. No one knows what Aaron Rodgers is thinking, which is why all of this is conjecture, and why it's so hard to pin down exactly what he's thinking and feeling, because like you both have mentioned, he could change his mind. He could have a vision in a dream tonight and change his mind about what he's thinking.
And that let me know if you probably having to deal with George Pickens when he's not getting the ball enough. That would be the dream that I think might send me into retirement. That would,
I think they call that a nightmare.
Yes.
I will say, and let me know if you want these numbers now, or we can argue about this in a minute, but when you talk about the national narrative being that, why wouldn't you want Aaron Rodgers? Obviously he's the best choice. I actually ran the numbers, and he's not a fit for the Steelers offense. I hate to say at all, but compared to Russell Wilson averaged 7.6 yards per attempt. Rodgers was 6.7 last year. He threw the ball. He got the ball out of his hands, 2.69 seconds to throw. That was fifth among all qualified quarterbacks last season. 6.6 average throw distance, fifth shortest in the league. And last year marked his only full season as a starter. He averaged a throw distance below 7.4 yards. All of that to say, his MO right now at this point in his career, a year now, it'll be 2 years removed from this Achilles tear, is get the ball out of his hands quick, get it to the playmakers, pick up yak. By the way, his run games that he's played in have also not been very prolific run games, and some of that is personnel and offensive line. The Jets ranked 28th in designed run plays last year, and the Packers, while he was there from 08 to 22, ran on just 37% of plays, which was the fourth lowest rate in the league over that span. Nothing he does yes, he's a four-time MVP, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, all of these things, but just because you have that pedigree and that resume doesn't mean that you're the right fit in a system, in an organization that has now two guys that are significant vertical threats, and they want to run the ball. Arthur Smith wants to run the ball, and he wants to throw to tight ends. That's not a thing that Aaron Rodgers does. He doesn't want to do those things. And he has not shown us to this point in his career that he's willing to adapt to someone else's
point in his
scheme.
Career. He's a 42-year-old man. Benz, as you touch on in one of your latest pieces on Trib Live, he has, if you wash off the brand name Rodgers from the back of the jersey there and just look at the results. He has not had a great year in at least 3 years. And the other thing is he's, not just the Achilles, he's been brittle. He's an older guy, so he's going to get beaten up. And the offensive line last seen, I know, Benz. I can't fully let go of my glass half full view of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I do expect the O-line to finally be a unit of strength this year. But if I'm at all wrong about that, if Brojo does not develop as the solid left tackle, Aaron Rodgers is not the guy you want back there. And, it's all built around the video game / fantasy thought of George Pickens and DK Metcalf on the same field. Like, all right, how's that going to work out if the old man doesn't have the time to take that deep shot?
And if your best running backs are Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren too. I mean, let's see what they do in the draft, but right now that's the case.
Sure.
The fantasy is you've got Pickens going down one side, you got Metcalf going down the other side. They got to keep the safeties out of the box. That opens up the middle for Freiermuth, and you can run the ball more often. Yeah, I get it. I get that's the theory, but having it happen in practicality is a different story. And to underscore where Brooke was going with that thought, the line does have to hold up to take those deep shots. I do think McCormick and Frazier will be more like the guys that we saw in late October, early November. I do think there's something to the rookie wall now. I kind of was a little bit skeptical of that. I felt like coaches sometimes use that, general managers use that as an excuse of convenience when rookies petered out and then blew it off if you asked about it in season. But I do think it was real with those guys. It's a long season now. They train longer. They train more intently coming out of the college season. They play the college season deeper. The NFL season runs deeper. The rookie wall is more real than it ever has been. So I think Frazier and McCormick with a full off season to recover will be better players through the year. I'm hoping that Jones goes over and is better at left tackle. I have no idea what Fautanu is, and maybe they get one more good year out of Siamalu. But all those ifs have to come together because he's going to need the time to take those deep shots. Aside from that, where Brooke was going with the thought about what the offense is going to look like as opposed to how Arthur Smith usually wants his offenses to look, it's going to look more like Ben Roethlisberger after the elbow injury. It's going to look more like 2020 and 2021. Get the snap, get out of it, and just throw it a couple feet, and hopefully you have a decent enough grip on the laces to even do that, which sometimes Ben wouldn't do. Like he was moving the ball like a point guard around the perimeter in an NCAA basketball game. Catch the ball and just move it. He was practically chest passing at times to Deontay Johnson, and that minimizes the impact that you're going to get out of Pickens and Metcalf for what they are. And of course, all that is assuming that that Pickens is here and they haven't traded him for to get that second round pick back, which I'm not dismissing, but it's been very quiet on that front, which makes me inclined to believe that as of right now, anyway, that's the direction they want to go. And then if he throws a temper tantrum or doesn't show up for a holdout or a hold in, maybe they reassess. But I hope they make that decision before the draft because I'd like to see him move for a second-round pick so they can get a really good receiver with pick 1, a still very good defensive lineman with pick 2, and then maybe use the other pick on the running back at pick 3 and address those big holes in the first 2 days before we get to the last day.
Right. If you swap basically Pickens for DK Metcalf, that's fine. I do think you have Pickens in the right season here, which is a contract season. And for all the concern about his maturity, I suspect he'll shape up real good when he knows he's playing for his professional future more than he has to date. I think you get the best season out of him possible, whether it's Pickens is on the team or not. So it's, I guess, a different evaluation for you, Brooke. But I mean, let's cut to it then. If Aaron Rodgers is the QB, does this mean the Steelers are a viable Super Bowl contender? How say you?
I don't think, to me, the quarterback decision between Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph does not make or break the Steelers' Super Bowl hopes. Like, to me, this team is not a quarterback away, first of all. They are in a worse position than they were a year ago. There's more question marks.
Disagree with that.
Really?
Jaden Daniels disproves that. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in.
I
Who's Jaden Daniels, though? Is Aaron Rodgers Jaden
right.
Daniels?
No, he's not. I'm saying that the idea that like this team isn't a quarterback
I thought
away.
you meant like
This team is not a quarterback that's available in 2025 away.
Okay. If
Yeah.
they would have gotten Matthew Stafford, you would hear me very bullish on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
If they had gotten Matthew Stafford, or even if they had been able to re-sign Justin Fields, I would feel much better about the height of their ceiling at this point. I think that
I probably agree. Yeah.
Stafford is a more sure thing. Fields is a boomer bust, but now they've got just two guys with, I think Mason Rudolph has a higher floor, question mark. I think Aaron Rodgers previously would have had a much higher floor, but Aaron Rodgers in his current state, no. He had a QBR of 1.9 last year. Like, that's in a real game that he played. Like, that's a low floor. But because of the situation with the run game, the secondary, I should be better adding Slay, but like I'm still this pattern of the 1-year rentals at corner opposite of Joey Porter Jr. are just I don't like it. I don't think that that's a viable thing to get through the year. Sometimes it works out great, but as much as you have the rookie wall, I also think that you have the old man wall in a lot of ways, that things go well in September, October, November. You get to December, your body starts acting up. There's things that teams have figured out how to play you, and it just, you go off a cliff. That's happened the last couple of years. So I don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to make this team a Super Bowl contender.
No, I don't think he is either. I think the hermetically sealed perfect scenario that I laid out before, which was Rodgers stays healthy the whole year, the offensive line is much better, the receivers stay healthy, and they find something at running back. I don't think that elevates their chances of getting to a Super Bowl. I think that elevates their chances of at least remaining 10-7, where otherwise I wouldn't have allowed myself to even think that. Like, I don't think they're getting back to 10-7 with Mason. I don't think they would have gotten back to 10-7 with Fields. I will disagree with Brooke a little bit on the Justin Fields thing. Like, I don't think you can call him boom or bust, Brooke, but I don't think he would have been allowed to boom here. You know, like, I don't think they would have given him the flexibility to boom. I think they would have always tried to contain it. They might have allowed him to run a little bit more than they did in the 6 games last year, because they were so panicked about what would happen to him if he got hurt while Russ was still convalescing. But from a passing perspective, I think they always would have had way too much of a governor on him, even with the 2-star wide receivers that he's got, especially since he doesn't throw the accurate deep ball that Rodgers and Wilson do. So I always had limited expectations for what Fields could have been here, and I think he did too. I think Fields looked at what his career would be here versus what it could be somewhere else, and that tiebreaker didn't need to be broken because the money didn't allow it to be a tie anyway. But I think if everything was 50-50, it wasn't. 50-50, he was going somewhere else because they couldn't tell him he was going to be the starter, and I don't think he believed that they would let him be all he could be. He was going to be a product of what Arthur Smith wanted him to be, and I can't blame him for not buying into that.
I told you exactly, and when I say you, I mean the world, a year ago, exactly how this was going to play out, including don't mess around mid-season at 4-2. You don't yank that guy because he's going to have feelings about it, and he comported himself like a pro and didn't bellyache in the moment. But I said that is not an indication that he is not going to carry that into the offseason and make that a part of his free agency decision. And here we are. By the way, where Rodgers is concerned, I can't get in his head either, but he did just renovate from cave to mansion in New Jersey. So what that matters. And to try and get in his head, if you want to stick it to the world a little bit, if you're raw with your last employer, well, then stay in the same stadium and show everybody what you can do without ever even moving your locker, right? Probably they don't.
He probably knows that he can't do that with the Giants because the Giants are, I think, even worse. That's
probably.
Let me throw. Yeah. I'm going to throw this at both of you guys and see what you think. I'll start with Brooke. All right, Brooke. If they had gotten Mason before Fields went to the Jets, like if move one was to get Mason as a backup quarterback, just go get him as your number 2. In other words, you've set yourself up where you're not going to draft a quarterback as the next guy, do you think Fields is more inclined to stay in Pittsburgh? Like, I don't know if they ever thought of that as an option, and they only went to Mason where things started to look bleak and they needed an emergency Band-Aid that they could pass off as a number one. But once they did that, it jumped into my mind that if I'm Justin Fields and I see the guy that they've passed over 3 times and turned over to free agency 3 times and have had guys signed and drafted in front of him and only turned to an emergency, unless I suck, I'm the starter. Like, I wonder if that would have convinced him to stay here, as opposed to the threat of, they're going to sign me, I'm going to be here, and then they're going to draft Jackson Dart or Tyler Shuck in the 2nd round, and it's going to be, hey, how about him? And then I'm going to be the one that's booed coming onto the field in a preseason game like Mason was.
I don't think so, because to me, it feels a little bit different than when Mitch Trubisky signed and then they drafted Kenny Pickett under him. Like that year,
well, the Pitt factor
right,
puts it on steroids,
right?
Yeah.
And that felt very clear that they were going to draft a quarterback this year because they have so many other needs. I don't. Again, putting myself in Justin's shoes, I don't think I would have been threatened by anyone in this quarterback class and would not have felt that the Steelers would have an urgency to draft someone and move them into the starting job if I suck. Like, I would feel like my job was pretty safe regardless of if it's Mason or another rookie quarterback. Like, I think that Justin is savvy enough and confident enough in his talents and knowing how he would factor in that. I don't think that would have changed his mind. To me, what you said about the idea of being able to reach his full potential, not having a leash, not having to play conservative football, I think that was a factor. And I think money was a factor. And the reality is the Steelers like Justin Fields, but not enough to get in a bidding war over him. So that made the decision easy for him.
You know what? I also think, yeah, right. The grass is not always greener, but it was Jets greener for him because of what happened. Like I say, to some extent, the 4-2 and getting yanked indicated to him he is not regarded as the answer at quarterback in Pittsburgh. And even if they tell him he's the starting QB in 2025, there still isn't a path to him to be the long-term answer. It seems pretty clear based on what they were willing to pay him that they viewed him as a bridge guy. And I mean, the downside is, man, you signed with the New York Jets. It's not like that's a place of stability, but it seems to me like the writing was on the wall for Fields and his team to look at it and say, Pittsburgh is never going to embrace you as the guy. They might put you in there as a transitional guy, but they are. And that's why Rodgers has some appeal here for all the compensatory picks and all the talk about this, as though Khan is playing 4D chess by aligning things for 2026. As I point out to everybody who supports this plan, I understand that time is a flat circle, but Cam Hayward is on a line in his career, and that line is coming to an end. So is TJ Watt. So you're going to be a year deeper into those two careers. The defense, in other words, is not necessarily going to be the unit that you lean on anymore by 2026. It's imperfect, at least. But the other thing that occurs to me, Benz, is I mentioned Hayward's talking was on with Ryan Clark. I had a very similar conversation with Cam Hayward at a Super Bowl 2 years ago. And, it's striking on the human level, the difference, the rarity of what Tomlin is apparently in pro football, which is a head coach who is transactional like anybody else, but at least he looks you in the eye and he tells you the truth and he respects you as a man. These are good things in a sincere way. I mean that. And he's willing to tell you what your flaws are. And he knows how to motivate you and get the best version of you as a football player out there. And these are all great qualities. But it all is starting to take on for me as I lean into the dark side with Tim Benz here, that he was born into. I'm starting to feel like it's got a bit of a David Shaw at Stanford kind of vibe, a little bit like these are all great things on a human level, and it means that the floor is high on any Mike Tomlin team, but what they're doing is kind of something other than the point in pro football. They're this island of misfit toys, and we'll fix you up and get the best version of you. And Aaron Rodgers, it may not have gone well the last 3 years, or Russell Wilson, may not have gone well the last 3 years, but we're the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we have the guy who knows how to make things work. Look what he's done with George Pickens. He wouldn't even be on the field if it weren't for Mike Tomlin. Okay, great. George Pickens plays hard half the time. Is that distraction worth what it does to the entirety of the roster? And is that, I said it the last time the three of us talked, is Tomlin a little high on his own supply? Like,
yes,
yeah, I get that guy didn't work in that situation, but I know how to make this work.
Yes. And it's been like that for a long time. It's just that I think people outside of Pittsburgh are finally starting to acknowledge it. I say it all the time that Mike Tomlin gets more credit than anybody else for putting out fires that he starts.
People love that line when you dropped it last time here.
Yeah, or if you want to say he gets credit for, keeping the Titanic afloat after he hit the iceberg. It's just, we have to disassociate this notion from reality, and the notion is that he does whatever he does with the deck of cards that he's handed, and that's not true. He builds the deck. He is very much at the helm of decision-making when it comes to this team. I mean, we all love to throw praise at Tomlin for his care in the pre-draft process, and, oh my God, no other head coach goes to all these pro days. Well, all right, then you can't just put the drafting on the front office if the drafting doesn't go well. And I think a lot of national outlets do that. They refuse to associate Tomlin's level of blame with those. How the roster is constructed always seems to be somebody else's fault, and then we just credit Tomlin for getting it to 10 wins every year. And then when they lose in the playoffs, it's always somebody else's fault. This year, I guess it's the quarterback, or previously was the offensive coordinator. Then again, he hired the offensive coordinator. Hired the offensive coordinator this time. Hires all of his staff. But there's always this cognitive dissonance between what Tomlin is all about when it comes to being an all-encompassing coach and a hands-on guy and in complete control and complete charge until something goes wrong and it's somebody else's fault. And that tends to drive me a little insane.
Well, it's like I compared it last week to, I think Mike Tomlin thinks he's making the next sequel to The Expendables. It's like, we can still look, people think we're washed up, Russ. No, Aaron. No, Darius. But we'll show the world we can still get some box office. Yeah, it'll be empty calories. It's not going to lead to a trophy. There's not an Oscar/Lombardi at the end of this, but we'll show that we're still worth something to those who are our doubters out there. Brooke, you're a basketball fan. Your team actually made the tournament, even though they shouldn't have. The Cuse and Pitt and IU didn't make the tournament. Either way, as PFT commenter pointed out, Aaron Rodgers was at the Steelers facility last Friday for 6 hours, right smack dab on the first Friday of the tournament, a March Madness. Who does that? What the hell did they talk about for so long?
As Robert Morris was trying to upset Alabama, by the way, it was a hell of a Friday news dump by the Steelers to put that out there as Robert Morris was making its big comeback against Alabama.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I've told this story a couple times. I was by the Steelers facility when news came out that he was visiting because I live like a mile and a half away. I walk on that trail all the time. And I was like, I'm going to get some fresh air before I sit down and watch college basketball all afternoon. And I was at the REI in Southside Works when I saw the news. And I was like, well, I guess I better turn around and go park it outside of the gate. So I sat there for like 45 minutes, not knowing how long he would be. Eventually my editor said, like, okay, you probably need to go home and take a shower because if something happens, you can't do TV in workout clothes. And I said, that is very fair. But
I'm not doing this podcast with any pants, so I think you could have pulled that off.
Fair. I think there may be some like regulations about wearing pants on TV. I don't want that fine. But I will say the thing that I noticed when I walked back and forth in front of the facility before I knew Aaron Rodgers was in there was that they appear to be resodding the practice fields because they had the back gate open. And so I could just see it was just dirt and then like a big mound of dirt. And I wondered, like, what is Aaron Rodgers thinking when he comes into this facility that is just splitting at the seams with parking because they are completely out of space. It's a very old school facility. Now you can't even really look at the practice field. So there's a lot of like envisioning and what ifs. And I mean, if the guy likes to just go on these mental journeys, there was a lot of daydreaming that I think he could do, and manifesting, talking with coaches of, if you come here, the field will look better, the offense will look better, your line could look like this. If they're talking for 6 hours, I think that there's a lot of pitching back and forth. I'm not surprised that he left without a deal. That would not be the Aaron Rodgers way. The thing that I have been told from people around the league is that Aaron Rodgers is not going to be pressured by anything or operate on a timeline that would traditionally pressure other people. Like when news of the Vikings, like, hey, we're not going to make a decision right now. Like if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll make my decision this afternoon now that that's squared away. Like, no, he's not. That's not going to push him into doing something. Same thing as like if I go on a visit or if I go on a job interview, I'd kind of expect to get an offer either while I'm there or soon after and make my decision. Like, what else do I need to know? But I think that he is not like that. And I would not be surprised if he goes to visit the Giants and do a day in the life at the Giants facility.
But Benz, so do you think Arthur Smith, I should say, is sitting in there and be like, and then we like to do this. This is sort of our philosophy in approaching early downs or in the first half of football games? Or do you think it's more like Aaron telling him like, Arthur, I already talked to Nathaniel Hackett and he's agreed to let you carry my helmet during games. Like, I mean, like, what is the back and forth of what they're going to do? It will be what Aaron wants to do mostly, right?
Yes. Or they can go with the illusion that it's going to be what Arthur wants, and then Rodgers is going to change his mind at the line of scrimmage or change the play at the line
exactly.
of scrimmage. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm surprised that they were trying to be, apparently, as restrictive of Russ as they were. I would have thought they'd be a little bit more hands-off because, for what Russ's faults are, I don't think getting a proper read at the line of scrimmage is one of them. Maybe seeing the ball over the middle once it's snapped might be a bigger issue for him. But up here, I don't think Russ has a problem. If they didn't trust Fields in that regard, I get it more. But I kind of thought that the hope was once Russ got in there, they'd allow him to check at the line of scrimmage and do things that grown-up quarterbacks do and that they allowed Ben to do. I don't. And Tomlin seemed to be party to that as well, based on what I've heard, is that he seemed to be on board with wanting to control things more with a veteran quarterback of that standing, which surprises me. And by extension, I'm also a little bit surprised that Russ still wants to come back here because of that. And maybe that's because he just doesn't have options.
I think, right. I think that's the main thing, just like it was last year. The deja vu of who was after Russell Wilson a year ago. The Giants and the Steelers. Those were the only two teams that were talking possible starter gig. The Raiders, I guess, a little bit a year ago with Russ. Now, who's talking about Aaron Rodgers as a starting option? It's the same two teams. It's really pathetic. But I will say, if I'm Rodgers, my 2 cents, because I'm sure he's listening right now, is okay, Pickens and DK Metcalf and the stability of the Steelers brand and all that versus staying in New York, same building, sticking it to the Jets, presumably, because you're great, right? You want to show everybody what a dynamite player you are. Sign with the Giants. And by the way, practically speaking, neighbors and Travis Hunter, Rodgers is one of those cats who likes to teach. He likes to talk about himself as an old and bringing along the young guys. Great. That's a great opportunity. Work with 2 young studs that way. Stay away from the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers. That's my 2 cents. Right, Brooke?
You're right. He does like to teach, which
that's it.
I think that Aaron Rodgers needs the Steelers more than the Steelers need Aaron Rodgers. Like there's a lot of things that make sense for him here in terms of stability. And yeah, staying in New York might give him closer proximity to stick it to the Jets. But like, let's be honest, the Steelers are going to have more primetime games. We don't have the schedule for a little bit.
And Bungles are in the way, just as, commies and defending champs on one side to deal with. Neither one seems like if you I can't imagine Aaron Rodgers with his level of confidence. It's like, I don't think I'll win that division. But I think if he looks at either one, it's sort of a wash. Neither one is a
Right.
more favorable schedule to play against. I don't
Right.
think.
I still think that in terms of like national attention, the Steelers get more favorable national attention. Like, this is just a better situation. If you're trying to stick it to an ex, like, you want to date the girl that has like the best, I was going to say resume, but like, I hope we're not dating anyone based on a resume, but like the hottest friends, goes to the coolest clubs. Like, it's not just about like, oh, I'm going to date my ex's best friend and really stick it to her. Like, yeah, that could help because of proximity, but like, imagine if you could upgrade and be seen on Instagram with a way hotter girl in your perception versus like just around town with your ex's
Yeah,
best
well,
friend.
you're talking Eddie Spaghetti, our producer, seated up in Staten Island right now. You're singing his song. That's what he always says. He's like, New York City, fat. Pittsburgh, that's where the foxes run free, right? That's what you always say, isn't it, Spaghetti? That's where you want to be. That's prime time.
Sure, whatever you say.
See,
That was really
he agrees. That's all he
yeah.
has to say is, yeah, thumbs up, move along. All right, listen, I think we've said it all except this. First pitch, I know I'm a loon, but the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to the playoffs. I don't care if it's maybe just as a wild card. What? This is what the Steelers have done to my brain, Benz. 88 wins and a wild card.
88. Do you know
That's right.
You know what? There were 76 last year. You know what their win expectancy was? 70. It's like they actually, for all the talk of we got to win in the margins. That's the buzz phrase of the Pirates. Win in the margins. How wide are these margins exactly? Because if you look at like one-run games, they were right at the norm last year. If you look at what they were in extra innings, one game below 500.
O'Neal Cruz must soar. There's no doubt. But the advantage they have in almost every series once Bubba Chandler arrives is on the hump.
Shek, does anybody have a position, or is this just softball or little league, and we write out the lineup card based on who shows up with what glove?
I'm trying to solve the Steelers right now. I was just trying to go out nicely with a little bit of optimism.
You can't do that.
When we're trying to lick our wounds from watching Sidney Crosby individual highlights and the Steelers come apart over many years. I just want a ray of sunshine. Can't we do that, please?
You can be totally optimistic about the Penguins because now they're winning all their games because it's hurting their draft stock. They're not going to lose for the rest of the year. They're going to play themselves out of the lottery. Tristan Jarry is back, baby. Sid for the Hart Trophy. This is. I
feel like he's being sarcastic, Brooke.
Is
Give me your win total for the Bucks.
The exact, less than 88.
Less than 88. Okay.
Less than 88.
500.
I'll give you 75. I'm gonna go right in between you guys. I think it's gonna be more than 70, but not more than 88.
Wait, Ben said 70? That's your final answer?
70, yeah. And I think 20 of them will go to Paul Skeens.
That stinks. All right, that's enough.
Say a 20-game winner for Paul Skeens. The rest of the team gets 50.
This is what I talk about, Benz, when I talk about the performative stuff. 70 wins. Come on, Paul Skeens. That's exactly right. It's not going to be Steve Carlton on the Phillies in what was that? Or in the Cardinals in 73, was that?
He might have been better.
That was. Anyway. All right, listen. Brooke Pryor, ESPN. Tim Benz, Trib Live. Find his podcast, his pages. All great stuff. Brooke on there with Greenberg and all the fancy pants is all over ESPN. Breaking the news on Aaron Rodgers when Aaron Rodgers decides to come out of his hole. Be on the lookout for Benz and Pryor. Great stuff from both of you. Thank you so much for joining. Let's do it again soon. Another Yins and Yang, shall we?
You bet.
Let's do it.
There they go. And as I go out here, a thanks to Eddie Spaghetti one more time. And thank you for subscribing on YouTube. And shout out to everybody in Pittsburgh, to the great Scott Neely. I'm in no frame of mind to talk about him except to say best man I'll ever know. The world's a sadder place, certainly on the banks of the Three Rivers, without the great man, Scott Neely. All right, we'll let you go there. And I think I'll be out of pocket the rest of the week. So be on the lookout for new Shek Show content over the next coming days. We'll see what happens. Until then, thanks so much, sports fan. It's been a thin slice of heaven.